Okay guys, how's everybody doing out there? I wanted to shoot this special video for my YouTube audience and everybody on Facebook and other social media channels. I have not been on for a long time because I keep a breakneck busy schedule, but I wanted to take some time tonight just to talk and share my thoughts and have a little fireside chat, because I know a lot of people have been wondering what my thoughts are about all of the tumultuousness that has been going on around the country. And so it started with me last night. I had a long conversation with my daughter, and that kicked it off because she has been very distressed and upset about all of the things that she is seeing happening in the news, and it worries and concerns her about her future. Pardon me. And so we talked, and I wanted to share a few things about what I said to her to reassure her and give her a sense of hope for her future. And I think that a lot of what we talked about would be great for everyone else to hear. So I just have a few notes here on my presentation just so I don't forget some of the bigger points that I wanted to make and parts of the conversation that I had with my daughter that I want to share with you. So if you don't know what my MO is, let me share it with you. For the people who know me and know some of my classic blog posts that I have done, or for people who have been involved in some of my motivational when I do a motivational speaking events, my MO is helping people find common ground. 4 years ago, whenever we had the outbreak, the riots that broke out after the Mike Brown incident in Ferguson, Missouri, I spoke at the conference for newly elected officials. They have a weekly training that goes on every year for newly elected officials so that they can give them some tools and training to be able to transition into their jobs as new politicians and dealing with helping people to get along and getting things done in their communities. And so I got to meet one of the new aldermen of Ferguson and had a great conversation after I got done with the speaking event, and it was quite a moving situation. So now here we are 4 years later in the same situation. And so when I spoke to the group of newly elected officials, I was teaching them about how they can use different tools and methods to help people find common ground so we can get along and get things done. So that is my overarching modus operandi, or however you pronounce that, is helping people to get along by finding common ground. So that's my basis there. So let's move right along. My daughter asked me specifically, Dad, how are we supposed to even view this? What are we supposed to think about all of what is going on and what we're seeing on TV? Now, everybody is different. No two people are the same. I don't have the answers, and I am not one to force anybody to believe my viewpoints, because everyone has a right to believe what they want. Belief systems are going to be different. They'll never be the same. But my way of dealing with this, I told my daughter, well, Sydney, we have to view this from a scientific standpoint. And she said, why? And I told her that when we allow our emotions to get involved with what we're seeing, it's sickening. When I first saw the video of what happened to the gentleman in Minnesota, it made me sick to my stomach. It was very upsetting, and I was not able to watch the entire video. In fact, I didn't even watch TV for days. I didn't even know that there was protesting breaking out all over the nation, because I chose not to give it my attention because I had my mind on positive things. But then when it came back to my attention and I could not ignore it, it was still as upsetting as it was before. So I pulled back from the situation emotionally and viewed this from a scientific standpoint to try to get an idea of why all of this craziness is going on the way it is. And so what I figured out is that there are a lot of raging emotions going on, from people being very sad, very shocked, alarmed, to anger, to just complete rage. And when we are in an emotional state, what I explained to my daughter is that we cannot function up here in the cerebral cortex. We lose our ability to remain in our executive functioning mind. That's something that I learned from my wife in some really amazing training that she had when she was working her former job in the transition room for the school district, combined with a lot of what I have studied about the brain and emotions. And it starts to make sense when you put the pieces of the puzzle together. Because human beings were created with this automatic override switch that kicks in to save your life. We call that fight or flight. So whenever we lived in the wilderness, caves, or whatever you want to believe that we used to live in, when your life was in danger, you did not have time to analyze the situation. If the saber-toothed tiger, or some of you who don't believe that man lived during the time of saber-toothed tigers, some people don't believe saber-toothed tigers existed at all, but I digress. For whatever large animal that could eat a human being, the human was designed by God to override the logical, executive functioning mind and have an immediate reaction that would save their life. We call that fight or flight. The shift would occur from the cerebral cortex to the limbic system, or the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is kicked off by the emotion of fear. Fight or flight begins with the emotion of fear. So when fear kicks in, the cerebral cortex is short-circuited, and we immediately run for our lives. Well, here's the kicker. From a scientific standpoint, did you know that it isn't just the fear emotion that causes logic to go out the window? It's any emotion. That's why we lose our minds when we fall in love, become angry, become extremely sad and fall into depression and want to hurt ourselves, and on and on. So if we know that a lot of this craziness is occurring where people are committing these ridiculous acts, including the one that sparked it all off, because of someone being in an emotional state, we have to pull back, or some of us have to. You don't have to. Some people do well with operating from an emotional state. But to understand this and to wrap your mind around what's going on, I have to switch off the emotions and understand this from a scientific standpoint, that it is within the DNA of human beings for this to occur. So when we look at all of the violence and the protesting that is going on, and we wonder, how can people loot? How can people attack innocent victims that are stuck on the highway when the mob is out there blocking the highway? How can people attack the police? How can people burn down buildings? Well, there's no logical thinking going on, because people are acting out in their emotions based on the fear that there is no more respect for human lives after the shocking, terrible video that we were all subjected to watch of what happened to the gentleman in Minnesota. Okay, so let's see here. What do I have next here? I wanted to talk about this. This is something I've been seeing circulating on Facebook. Silence is condoning your agreement to the treatment of African Americans in this country by the police. Okay. I hope that, forget that. Things that I say are going to make certain people angry, and it's going to make others say, I agree 100%. It's going to make even others think a little bit more beyond where their current line of thinking is right now. So I will have people that will get upset with what I'm about to say, but at least it's food for thought. Silence is condoning is a very dangerous thing to assume for all people. I view this as gaslighting. Why? Because it's not always a true statement, and it forces someone into a corner to speak and to obey the wishes of the person that puts out that phrase. Your silence is condoning. Well, what about my silence? Why have I been silent? Well, for starters, I work 26 hours a day. I'm very busy supporting my wife and my kids. And my parents are at an age where they have a lot of medical concerns. My parents will be 84 years old this summer and this fall. And I've had to go through 2 visits in the hospital from my mother in the last few months. So I have not had my time to stop and post my opinion on Facebook about everything that's going on. So I would certainly hope that someone does not want to think that my silence is condoning what's going on. Neither would I want anyone to think that this is a general statement that applies to all people, because we don't know everyone's life situations. Now, in my own situation, I would go on to say that not just from being busy, but there's another reason why I have been silent. I don't quite know what to say. I don't have all the answers. I'm not the authority. I'm not the president. I'm not Martin Luther King. I'm not a minister. I don't have those magic words. And my fear is I don't want to say the wrong thing and speak prematurely and say something that will cause more divisiveness or hurt. My hope and my wish is that I can say something that will help heal and bring people together. So I understand the frustration of those who have made the statement against others for being silent, but I don't want to judge anyone who doesn't feel comfortable making public statements. And anyway, who passed a law that Facebook is required for us to speak our opinions about very divisive political topics? Is there any rule that says you have to speak your mind? Is there any rule stating that you have to be on Facebook? What if you're in a situation where you can't make statements on Facebook for reasons like your job, your political position, or for security reasons? We don't know what the reasons are, but I would hope that we give a little bit of leeway before we say that your silence is condoning the wrongful actions that are happening in all of the violence and the protests. Well, that's a long talk for another day right there, but let's move on along to the last topic that has been on my mind. We see violent protests and we see peaceful protests. I've noticed there's a lot of bickering and fighting among people on Facebook and other places where certain individuals speak out against the violence and then they're attacked by those who make the assumption that speaking out against the violence automatically means that they don't have respect for the life that was lost from the individual from Minnesota. That's a pretty large leap of an assumption that is being made. And it's not an argument that can be resolved. I don't think that we should put our energy into arguing that point back and forth. Because we see certain people that say we should not judge those who are committing violent acts because we don't know the pain that they have lived through. We have others who say there's no excuse ever for acts of violence because God calls us to be obedient and to treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves. So I don't have an answer for that. And I'm certainly not going to get involved in the arguments back and forth. Me, myself, and I'm a peaceful person. And I would choose not to be involved in any type of violent protesting. But that's my right. However, I'm not going to judge anyone else for the way that they express their feelings and for their ideas on what methods should be put forth in place to make change happen. So there's a lot of peaceful protesting that's going on. And I think that for those of you who judge all of the protesting, where you make the assumption that all protesters are violent protesters, have a look at all of the peaceful demonstrations that are going on. And know that there's still some faith in humanity, that there are people who don't have violent intentions, who just want everyone to get along, and that they want to affect change. I think the only way that we can really affect change is if we picture a positive future. Until we can picture it in our mind that we're getting along, I don't know if it will happen. So for those of you who want change, I know a lot of negative things are being spoken, especially about how many decades have gone on that we've had marches and protests, both peaceful and violent, only to be here today where we have the same situation that we've seen year after year. So I don't know what the answer is of what can affect change. But I certainly hope that we can stop judging each other and fighting. The last thing that I would like to mention that's not on my list here is the arguments that I'm seeing about Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. Can I tell you that arguing with people on those two phrases is a complete and utter waste of time and emotional energy? Here's why. There's no agreement on the premise of the argument. In other words, when someone says Black Lives Matter, the people who are offended don't understand what they mean. And so they come back and make a statement, all lives matter. When they make that statement, the people who said Black Lives Matter don't understand what they mean. Both take offense and a fight ensues. You wouldn't believe how many arguments I have seen breaking out over these two statements. I think that if we just sat down and took a deep breath and give people the benefit of the doubt before passing judgment, maybe we wouldn't fight so much about those two phrases. The people who are offended by Black Lives Matter will only think about the worst that the group has to offer. They hear and remember the group that was chanting pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon, or whatever they were saying. And they think that the intent of the phrase is to say that black lives come above all others. When maybe what they really mean is that in their eyes, since they see violence committed against black people where there is a less amount of respect given and the benefit of the doubt is not given, that some lives are lost, they want to say, well, black lives do matter because the presumption is that certain individuals have no respect for the lives of black people. But when the individuals that come back and say all lives matter, they offend the people who are screaming Black Lives Matter because they don't understand that their response is out of the ignorance of understanding their own selves. Maybe if we stopped and asked them, what do you really mean by that? They would probably tell you that they think it's unfair because they infer that you have a belief that black lives are more important than all other lives. Can you see how this is an argument that will never be resolved? All we have to do is stop, take a deep breath, assume the best from the other person, and pause before passing judgment. And then have a discussion. And maybe we don't see these sad circular arguments go on the way that they do. Well, that's all I've got to say for right now, but I just wanted to share my thoughts and say that I'll probably be sharing more conversations on the channel for a while about the social events happening in the country, about the financial events happening in the country, and giving you a little bit of encouragement to help you view a positive future and have the faith and belief that everything is going to be all right, based on the premise that if we find common ground between each other, we can be in harmony. That's about all I've got. Post your comments, and if you have a topic you'd like to talk about, please share it. And until next time, we'll see you.